to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LAFB Network. This is your first time tuning into the show. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein, it's a great day for Chargers Unleashed because we are officially 30 days away from the NFL draft. And in continuing with our draft prospect rankings, as we always do, we kicked it off last week with the linebackers. Now we decided to go and shift towards the offensive side of the ball. And I know we had talked about how difficult the linebackers were last week, but that was just because it was hard for us to fill out a group of 10, the ones that we felt were good fits for the Chargers. And it really came down to like a smaller group. It's a very different case for the running backs because now, with free agency, with Gus Edwards arriving, and there's been a lot of different opinions about this running back group in general, but there's actually more running backs than you think that could actually end up fitting exactly what the Chargers need in their current run back stable right now. So the good part about this is we're going to have a lot of players to talk about. The more divisive side of this is that Dan and I obviously are going to be wrong. And Dan and I's lists are probably going to be very different as we go through all these. But, of course, before we kick it off, Dan Wolkenstein, how are you, sir? I know you're excited for this one.
Yeah, I'm excited for this one. This one was one that I didn't think I would be as excited for. And then as I started kind of getting into the film and looking at some of the data to back everything up and what my eyes are saying, and there's a lot of stuff in here that surprised me when I was going through the evaluation. And we're doing this raw. Jake and I have not seen each other's lists at all. And so I'm very curious to see how this ends up going. What I notice here, Jake, and we'll probably get into, is there are so many different flavors of running backs in this class. And while the top end isn't quite there, like we saw in years past, like a Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs even, that necessarily isn't there. And the one guy who might be there is coming off of a pretty substantial injury that has a lot of people kind of ears perked and red flags raised. So that being said, the Chargers, you mentioned it, are in an interesting position because they have some of their running game already established, both in blocking and in pass protection, as well as with Gus Edwards. And so kind of that running back by committee is in full tilt, possibly there. They could look for a bell cow, but we'll get into it. Jake, without further ado, before we get to that, though, let's pay the bills, talk about our friends.
I want to let everybody know that the easiest way to get into the sports action that's out there right now, especially if you're into March Madness, it's Underdog Fantasy and their pick'em game. Just pick higher or lower on your favorite or least favorite player's stats, and you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. Underdog keeps it super simple with their easy-to-use website and mobile apps. Just pick between 2 and 5 players to fill out your pick'em entry. Get every pick right and take home some cold, hard cash. Use the promo code UNLEASHED and get your first deposit doubled up to $500 by Underdog. Head on over to Underdog Fantasy today and let them know that Chargers Unleashed sent you.
Jake, 6 through 10. Let's start off. So how we're going to do this. Jake, give us your 6 through 10. We'll kind of go into them briefly, kind of go back and forth on some of the reasons for or against some of the guys, where I have maybe some of your guys on the list, maybe some guys who didn't make that part of the list, the top 10. Without further ado, Jake, let's kick this off. I'm excited, man. Let's get into it.
Okay. You know, when I get through saying my 6 through 10, we'll even drop in some honorable mentions here as well. I'm sure people are probably going to tune off the show. So
that's why we're here.
This is the best part about this running back class, Dan, because there's so many divisive perspectives on who people have as RB1. And then there's some people that don't even have them listed at all. It's all over the place. So, okay. 10 through 6 for me. Mm-hmm. And it was actually hard rounding this out, and I will still mention a few guys that were literally just on the cusps of this list, and it was razor thin trying to get this out. So at 10 and ascending to 6, I had Tyron Tracy from Purdue, Will Shipley, Ray Davis.
It's already spicy. I like this.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
Braelon Allen right above him. Marshawn Lloyd, how many is that? How many was that? That was 4. Then Marshawn Lloyd. Now remember, again, Dan and I are skewing this to running backs that we believe are a better fit for the Chargers, especially for the standpoint of now Greg Roman is coming as the offensive coordinator. last time that we talked about this, Gus Edwards was not around, so you're not necessarily looking for the 3-down bell cow. I believe that they are strictly going to go with running back by committee in this particular system that Greg Roman wants to install here. So there's going to be multitude of different reasons why guys are ranked where they are. There's going to be reasons why you don't hear some of the guys that Dan and I have on this list. So if that doesn't set you off, that's my 6 through 10. Again, we'll go into some little blurbs. Dan, I'm interested in hearing yours.
Yes. Real quick, give us your 6 through 10 one more time.
So 6 through 10, start off with Tyron Tracy from Purdue. Then we go to Will Shipley. We go to Ray Davis. Then we go to Braelon Allen. Then we go to Marshawn Lloyd.
All right, so Tyron Tracy's 10 for you, or is he 6?
Sorry, that was in ascending order. So Tyron Tracy is 10.
Okay, so I'm higher on Tyron Tracy than you. So I have him higher than that. I have him at number 6. A couple of names you have there aren't on my list. Will Shipley, Ray Davis. I'm curious what you see for them. They are in my honorable mentions. Just missed the cut. What got you onto them?
So I'll start with Ray Davis. I just love everything about Ray Davis. I know he's on the older side, which, again, in this particular situation, I know that's, first of all, there's going to be about 3 running backs on my list that are on the older side. But in a running back by committee type of scenario, that kind of gets washed away. And we are talking still about older guys that actually don't have that much tread on the tires. And Ray Davis specifically is one of those guys. What I love from Ray Davis is you just, first of all, just talk about a great story ascending into where he's at now at University of Kentucky. But he had experience through 3 different colleges, between Temple, then Vanderbilt. Then he suffered a torn ligament in his toe that ended his 2021 season. Now, he doesn't possess some of the high-end traits of other running backs on this list, but he has the skills and that should translate very, very well to the NFL, especially if we're talking about coming in as an RB2. So what is it that he does really well? So he's had success in both run and gap schemes. Obviously, with Greg Roman, he loves to run his gap schemes more predominantly, but he runs both, tailors them more to opponents on a week-by-week basis, runs really, really well between the tackles, shakes defenders with his cuts. His best game came against Florida, had 280 yards rushing. And that game just kind of showed what he's all about. Power, outside running, cut ability, utilization in the pass game. I just love everything about Ray Davis when it comes to this. And again, we're talking about a guy, you look at some of these measurables that Dan has up here. This doesn't necessarily say for a guy who's going to be a bell cow back, but again, I don't think that that's what the Chargers are looking for with Gus Edwards and Isaiah Spiller still on this roster. So a lot of reasons to believe why, if you were to put a guy like Ray Davis into this roster, that he's going to be able to round out this stable and be a successful running back.
Yeah, Ray Davis, I'd like to. Again, honorable mention, I think I have him at 12 on my list. A lot of the reasons you said, I like him as well. Like, he's explosive out of the backfield. He seems to always kind of carry defenders for a few extra yards at the end of his runs, which I think is really, really good. The size, 5'8", a little shorter, but the guy's thick with 2 C's. Like, the guy's taking folks with him. The issue that I have with him is, like, while he has some good, like, stutter steps, he's got some, like, a nice jab step, which I like. He's got the shiftiness, and he has, like, the highlights, right? But I kind of am left wanting more from, like, a consistency perspective. Like, some of the numbers that he has kind of leave me wanting more. Like, I don't know. He's not a good pass protector, which I think is going to be crucial. That's a big area for him as red flag. Yards per attempt, 5.7. Like, it's good, but for someone like that, it needs to be a lot better when you're getting that much a volume. And I mean, that was 5.7 yards per attempt. That's 45th in college with runners over 100 snaps. Like, that's not great. And the missed tackles forced, 51 on the year, which by itself is good. But when you have 197 rush attempts, the missed tackles forced, the elusiveness just isn't, it kind of gets drowned out a bit. So I have him outside, a good guy. I like him. He's fun to watch outside of my top 10. You said Will Shipley. I have him outside honorable mention as well. I know some people might be freaking out there. I'll get to my 6 to 10 in a bit.
Really interested in your 6 to 10 then.
Yes. Tell me about him.
Yeah, I mean, Will Shipley's kind of just a different, again, this is kind of, pick your favorite flavor of running back. And when you talk about Will Shipley, versatility is the first thing that, pardon me, versatility is the first thing that comes to mind, whether his utilization in the run as a runner or receiver even contributes to get in special teams. Dan, 40 targets in each of the past 2 seasons. It's big when it comes to the receiving game. I'm interested to see, especially now, that how are you going to fill that gap of what Austin Ekeler brought to you in the receiving game now with the stable that you have. That's the great thing about this class, and just in terms of diversity and what other guys can bring to the table, especially if we're talking about guys that contribute in the passing game. Will Shipley is one of these type of guys. I like his footwork that I see on tape. Pardon me again. Has the long speed to break away from guys if he gets into open field. You'd like to see someone who's just, a little bit better built when it comes to getting into contact, because yes, I think that he's brought down a little bit too easily. So in comparison to a lot of the other guys that are higher on this list that can break those tackles and get those extra yards after contact, you'd like to see more from that from Will Shipley. But strictly just in the receiving game, that's what jumps out at you as in terms of to say, okay, that's going to be a huge factor for the Chargers to say, okay, how are we going to utilize that? How are we going to get some of those catches back that Austin Ekeler took with him to Washington? And how are you going to fill that need? So again, I was gearing more towards finding a different flavor of running back between Gus Edwards and Isaiah Spiller. Who do you fit there in the middle? That's what I really liked from Will Shipley.
No, did I hear Bucky Irving in your list?
No, you did not, but that does not mean that he's not on it.
Oh, okay. All right, so let me give you my 6 through 10. So 10 to 6, I got Isaac Guerendo from Louisville, and I'll get into this. There's reasons why. Trey Benson, Florida State, I have him at 9.
Oh, man.
And here come the pitchforks, but I have him at 9. We'll get there. I love his 40 time, but there are lots of things that I'm not really a fan of for this team. But again, he's in my top 10, so I like him. Number 8, Audric Estime. I've been high on him for months. I think he would be a great fit for the Los Angeles Chargers and what this offense is looking to do with physicality and missed tackles forced and just bruising through lines. Number 7, I have Kimani Vidal from Troy. And you've seen the Chargers, I believe, have already met with him. He's got some epic numbers and statistics got to back up why he is looking very nice for the Los Angeles Chargers. The most 10-plus yard explosive runs in college, Jake. Most in the NCAA, 47 10-plus yard runs. Number 6, Tyron Tracy. This kid, love him. Love him. And he's got, arguably, if you just looked at like a resume and you just put statistics up, he might be number 1 in that regard. And number 5, we'll get to in a bit. So 6, Tyron Tracy, 7, Kimani Vidal, 8, Audric Estime, 9, Trey Benson, and 10, Isaac Guerendo.
Wow. Okay. So Kimani Vidal ended up as 11 on this list. This was one of the very hard ones, especially when it came between him and Tyron Tracy in terms of who was I going to leave into to make the top 10. And honestly, it could have been a coin flip. It could have been a coin flip because you gotta love what you see from Kimani Vidal. This is one of a few of the running backs that we'll be talking about that has that size be damn labeled. Kimani Vidal at 5'8", 215. As Dan was mentioning in terms of his production, all-time leading rusher with just over 4,000 yards rushing. 1,600 of those just came in 2023. He is a compact workhorse. Daniel Jeremiah called him a poor man's Josh Jacobs. And in terms of zone gap versatility, in terms of what he can thrive in, he's got it. I love what I see from Kimani Vidal. And screw top 10 list, because this is where I'm already pissed off right now from the standpoint of I had to rank someone higher to keep Kimani Vidal out of the top 10. I wish we could be just abnormal and say top 11. I'll go to Tyron Tracy, who is your number 6, Dan. Talk about a trip from a guy who used to be went from receiver to running back, spent his first 5 years of college at Iowa, then became full-time starter with only one season for Purdue, still finished with 716 yards, 9 touchdowns, led the Big Ten with 6.3 yards per carry, had a very, very impressive combine, showed a lot of plus athleticism. He's got good vision, a nice power, a nice mixture of power and agility. It was Lamar Conrad that was that actually put his receiver skills on display. That was his running backs coach there at Purdue. Versatile skill set that matches well in a committee type of backfield. Another guy who's 24 years old, but this is another player where there's not much tread there. And if we're talking about installing a running back in an RB by committee type of situation, which the Chargers probably do, I think Tyron Tracy fits great into this scheme.
Yeah, I really like Tyron Tracy. So let's go back to Kimani Vidal for a second. He's so fun to watch. And I think a lot of people are going to start seeing his name more and more as we get closer to the draft, which I can't believe is already like a month away, which is nuts. We already talked about the most 10-plus yards rushing, 10-plus yard runs in college football. Production machine, you talked about the 1,600-plus yards, 14 touchdowns. If you go look at PFF, his rushing grades are all off the charts. Like, especially considering his offensive line isn't that good. Zone grade, gap grade, elusive rating, all of that stuff is awesome. Yards after contact isn't the best. Great pass blocker. 5th best pass blocking grade amongst RBs with 100-plus rushing attempts. 2nd in college football in missed tackles forced with 94, Jake. 94 missed tackles forced. 94. That's insane. Yards after contact, he's 3rd with over 1,000 yards after contact. Again, with running backs over 100 attempts. But the part that is a little rough is his yards per attempt is low, 5.6. Now in the NFL, 5.6 is great. But in college, again, I go back to his offensive line, not great. That's where I think that's going to be an issue. Blocks well, elusive, missed tackle, machine, explosive run, elusive. I really like Kimani Vidal. He's one of my dark horses for this Chargers team. That's why I have him so high on my list. Again, number 7 for me. And Tyron Tracy. Tyron Tracy, Jake. Number 6 on my list. I love this kid, man. I love Tyron Tracy. The guy's got violent feet. Again, 5'11", 210.
Yeah.
But he's just like an offensive weapon, dude. Like, there's a comp that I have for you that I'll tell you about in a second here, but he reminded me of somebody immediately. 4.48 speed. He hits holes quickly, violently. His totals aren't there. Like, the total volume of production isn't there, but that's just because he wasn't utilized as much as some of like the other weapons on this list. Like, he only has 114 rushing attempts. But if you take away the volume and just look at the averages, his averages are elite. Jake, 5th highest elusive grade among running backs with 100-plus attempts at 163.5. 5th highest elusive grade. 4th best yards after contact per attempt in college with 100-plus attempts or more. 4.44 yards after contact per attempt. Great out of the backfield. His missed tackles forced, Jake, 46, but out of 114 attempts. That's like a 0.40 missed tackles forced per attempt, which is elite. There's like one guy here that I've seen that has a better average than that. The guy is just a playmaker. He's raw for a running back, which I think is why some people aren't as high on him. And he has athleticism, but he doesn't look the part of a running back, but he looks like an offensive weapon. He's got the flashiness, explosive in spades. Teams in the NFL are going to crave that type of dynamic playmaking ability. Great to the backfield. The guy he reminds me of, Jake, Antonio Gibson. He reminds me of Antonio Gibson, where every time you see him with the ball in space, he's making something happen. And when he's not in space, he's forcing missed tackles. And those who have been on with us for a while know how much Jake and I, especially me, loved Antonio Gibson. Tyron Tracy reminds me of him.
that's why I was giggling, not as like a slight to either Antonio Gibson or Tyron Tracy. It's because Dan might be the president of the Antonio Gibson fan club. If anybody's been watching this show for years, Dan was adamant in trying to find a way to get Antonio Gibson to the Chargers when he was coming out for the draft. So it's ironic. Of course, Tyron Tracy reminds Dan of Antonio Gibson.
We're full circle. Now, I have Trey Benson here, which I believe you have much higher than I do. So, is he in your top 5?
He is in the top 5, yes.
Okay, so I will table Trey Benson so we can get it to it when he come around for yours. Audric Estime, is he in your top 10? He is not in your top 10. And honestly, I'm not surprised. A lot of people see him as, I don't want to say a poor man's Braelon Allen, but like the same kind of archetype, and see him as a lesser version of him. So I understand why he wouldn't be there. But I've loved Audric Estime for a minute now. And I think some people forget, like, while he is that bruising back, and while he is maybe not the fastest of a lot of these playmakers that we're going to be talking about, the guy just knows how to work, man. 6.4 yards per attempt, 18 touchdowns and almost 1,400 yards, 5.8 yards per carry last year, 6.4 yards per carry this year. Those are great numbers. Elite rushing in both zone and gap rushing. His missed tackles forced, Jake, 64 missed tackles.
It's great.
On 209 attempts. For being someone that big, a 0.30 missed tackles forced per attempt, that's pretty darn good. He's a lot better at missed tackles forced than a lot of the guys who are a lot shiftier and faster than he is. 15th best elusive grade in college amongst running backs with 100-plus rushes. For a guy that big, again, we're talking 5'11", 220. 16th most 10-plus rushing yards amongst all rushers with 100-plus attempts. Get this, 5th most 15-plus yard rushes among rushers with 100-plus attempts. 5th most. The thing that killed him was that 4.71 40 time at the combine. Everyone saw that, including myself, and my heart dropped. And I hated that for him because he does not look like a 4.71 guy on film.
No.
But I believe what my eyes tell me. 38-inch vert, 5'11", 220. Definitely some like untapped potential out of the backfield. I think he has 0 drops in the last 2 years out of the backfield. The guy is so hard to tackle. I really like his low pads, great use of leverage. I think people are just really sleeping on this kid, man. Like, he's so good between the tackles. He prides himself in not going down. Like, you see it as he sheds arm tackles attempts, at least, and just kind of glides through folks who are trying to reach with their hands. He's okay pass blocking, but I just think he's slept on by a lot of people who don't.
Surprisingly agile for a guy that size as well, hurdling defenders. Look, my reasons for not having him in my top 10 is not because I do not like Audric Estime. And Dan, like you, I was very high on Audric Estime. And spoiler alert, if you haven't figured this out, Dan and I would take any one of these running backs that we're talking about as it relates to the Chargers. Again, you're not looking for your bell cow 3-down running back in this class. To me, once that speed thing hit, and I know you mentioned his 4.7 140 at the combine. Thankfully for him, he improved it on his at his pro day when I think he got it down to a 4.58. So that was a much better look for him in that circumstance. But it still kind of screams at you, short yardage, goal line back. That might be what he ends up turning into. And if the Chargers didn't have Gus Edwards right now, I would probably say that there's a great chance that he could possibly be the selection. I feel like the skill trait dynamics between Gus Edwards and Audric Estime as it stands right now are too similar. And maybe the way that I'm thinking about it is I'm thinking about getting a little bit more versatility into this running back class. Not to say that, hell, you couldn't go with just a power eye type of formation with these type of backs.
The big sexies.
Yeah, exactly. And just saying, look, we're just going to pound this down your throat 2 to 3 yards at a time. Don't give a shit. We're going to try to find a way to win that way. Yep. But it is crazy, though, for a guy that's that big that moves like Audric Estime does.
Yeah. Last one on my list, Jake. We'll get to 10 for me. Isaac Guerendo. We didn't talk about him much before. 6 foot 220. Everyone saw him blaze the combine. He saw the 4.3, 340, 41.5-inch vertical, 10.9 broad. Like, the guy's insane. You're not going to catch him if he gets behind you. He kind of reminds me of like a Ryan Matthews type. Slippery, compact lower half. He's not the most athletic, and I say that, and it sounds crazy because he just ran a 4.3, 340, but like the lateral stuff isn't really there as much as I would like to see. And again, I know he's 6 foot 220, but like he's more of kind of a runway type where you just get him going and he'll either run around you or run through. But if he's had to kind of shift his way around, I just don't think that lateral quickness is there. On him, again, he's my number 10. Like, I'm solely having him here because I'm buying the upside and I'm buying the traits, like size, speed, banking on the coaching from this Charger staff. I think because we've talked about this, Jake, like for years, that this Chargers team needs speed on offense. That's why I have him on the list. For that simple reason alone, size, speed, traits, coaching. Get him there. I think they could do something with him. And he's not on your list, right? Or is he?
No, he's not.
Okay, let's get to 5 through what? Did we get through all of your 6 through 10?
Well, let's touch on Braelon Allen, because Braelon Allen ended up being my number 6. This was another one where it came between the top 5 and who was going to be right outside of it, where it was literally a coin flip. And I probably made that 11th hour decision to make the final choice in slating him there. But Braelon Allen is a guy who we've talked about in this show previously, has been mentioned by Jordan Reed as the perfect fit for Jim Harbaugh's scheme. You've heard him mentioned other places in terms of how he's built, what he brings to the table. And again, 6'2", 245. I mean, again, a guy whose grades are all over the place in terms of how people view him. He's going to be one of the youngest players to come into the NFL at 20 years old, much in the similar way that Isaiah Spiller did when he came in.
Where was he on your list?
He ended up at number 6.
Okay, he's 5 for me, so we're pretty aligned here.
Okay. So, spoiler alert for defenders, you cannot tackle Braelon Allen high, or else he's just going to bulldoze you. And much kind of in the same way of the Audric Estime type of thing, if the Chargers just want to create just a power running scheme and just have Braelon Allen and Gus Edwards just bulldoze everybody that they end up coming through, hey, that's a way that they can go. And maybe that's a reason that they identify as Allen being that type of guy with the way that Jim Harbaugh wants to run and how Grey Roman wants to run the football. But there are too many inconsistencies with his traits, just in terms of vision, decision-making, relies more on his size and power rather than burst or agility to get by defenders. And that's what brings him down just a little bit to me. It's just, you got to get a few other things in your repertoire when you get to the next level. And I believe that those things are eventually going to grow for him. Obviously, the age, especially in comparison to some other players on this list, between, you go from 20 to 23, 24, his age is going to be a great thing that people are going to consider him high on, that they can say, oh, we can develop some extra traits out of him. Again, he wasn't utilized that much in the passing game, but he shows a natural ability to catch the ball. But in terms of a big back power type system that you want to run, I mean, those measurables just make you salivate. And what he could possibly do in this type of a system with Gus Edwards and Isaiah Spiller, I really like what I see from Braelon Allen. It's the upside, Dan. That's, again, the biggest thing that people are going to look at. 20 years old, there's so much room for him to extend the ceiling for him. Yes, the measurables are great. You're not going to bring him in to be your 3-down back bell cow. I understand everything as far as why people like him. But the best fit for him, honestly, right now is to join a running back by committee and see what the next 2 to 3 years have in store for him as he develops his game, because he's got plenty of time to do it.
Yeah, I really like Braelon Allen, honestly. And I have him, he cracks my top 5. Again, we're talking best fit for the Chargers here. And Jake, you said it. We're both going to be wrong. A lot of people are going to flame us. probably me more so than you for some of the hot takes that I have, some of the running backs that may not be in my top 10 or not in my top 3 or 5, whatever. It's fine. This running back class is very much like pick your flavor. And most of the guys in this class are kind of our BBC types. And Braelon Allen, to me, and you've heard Jordan Reed talk about it, you've heard Trevor Sikkema talk about it, Connor Rogers talk about it. Such a great fit for this Chargers team. And again, this is best fits for the Chargers, not necessarily best running backs. I love Braelon Allen. I absolutely love Braelon Allen. You talked about the 20 years old thing. He's so young. He has so much ahead of him. Grown man strength, dude. Like,
Yo.
Him and Audric Estime are the two that I'm like, yeah, you need to double team or else you're not getting him down.
Yeah.
You talk about production, man. 35 touchdowns and 3,400 yards roughly in 3 seasons. 35 touchdowns. Only one guy has more than that from what I've seen, and we'll talk about him later. Welcomes physicality, lowers his shoulders with force. I mean, yards per contact per attempt, 12th among all running backs with 100-plus attempts. The guy makes people regret trying to tackle him. He's not the most elusive, and this is where I actually think Audric Estime has a leg up on him, is being more elusive than him. But again, for his size, 6'1", 235, like, he sets up defenders better than you'd think. And he kind of has like the Derrick Henry comp a little bit in terms of like once he gets on that runway and once he gets past 60, like, phew, good luck. You know that show Bussin' with the Boys? Like, the Chargers would be busting if they drafted him. You got the Gus Bus, you got Braelon Allen. I mean, those buses are like school districts at this point. Like, that would be insane. Imagine having them. I know usually you go for like running back by committee and you want to have like 2 archetypes. But like, imagine if you had 2 of those guys where it's like, all right, you tired? All right, we'll bring in the next guy who's just as much of a physical specimen. Like, that would be fun, dude. That would be super fun. I mean, it's kind of fun when you see some like the highlights and stuff of him, like you hear like pad cracks echoing as he continues on. He's not the fastest. He's not the quickest. Like, he's not there for the lateral agility. You'll see a lot more of that in other running backs in this class. And I do think that there's probably some technique stuff and footwork refinement that he can get from coaching. But you said it. The kid's only 20 years old, man. He's only 20. And so he's got a long career ahead of him. And you think of the types of running schemes and styles that would just salivate at the idea of having him on their squad. And for what this Chargers team is looking to accomplish, archetype-wise and image-wise, he fits the bill, man. He just fits the bill.
Yeah, we're talking just like it was between 10 and 11 for my running backs. It was literally the smallest thing that kept Braelon Allen out of my top 5.
That's tough.
We got that one out.
Okay, so he was my 5. He was your 6, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so now we are on to your top 5?
That is it.
Okay. The floor is yours, my friend. So just to round this out, 6 through 10 for me. Number 6 was Tyron Tracy. Number 7, Kimani Vidal. 8, Audric Estime. 9, Trey Benson, which we'll talk about here. And 10, Isaac Guerendo. Jake, your 6 through 10?
It was Braelon Allen, Ray Davis, Bill Shipley, Tyron Tracy.
Number 5.
Actually, hang on a second. It's right. Hang on. There we go. Sorry. Number 5, Marshawn Lloyd out of USC.
Oh, yes. I can't wait for this one.
One of the more well-rounded running backs in the class. Great athleticism. His traits that you saw on tape were elevated from his testing at the combine. Explosive, runs with high effort, has all the long speed to pull away from defenders. He has that those quick feet and those tools to make defenders miss. He had better production in the passing game in 2023 than he had in years past. And Dan, he's a willing blocker, which, given what we talked about with this Chargers running back stable over the past few years, that's been something that's been missing from that particular group. So seeing Marshawn Lloyd being able to show plus signs in run blocking, or just blocking in general when it comes to protecting the quarterback, that's a huge plus for what this offense needs. Now, the other thing, and this is probably what did it as far as elevating Marshawn Lloyd as a better fit that kicked Braelon Allen slightly out under number 6. The familiarity. Coach McDonald, Keelan McDonald, who was Marshawn Lloyd's running back coach this past season at USC. You can't get any better than that. I mean, if what we know from Jim Harbaugh thus far is that he listens to his coordinators in terms of what they want, we've seen him listen to moves that probably make Greg Roman happy. We know that he's going to be listening to moves that are going to make Jesse Minter happy. I'm sure he wouldn't mind getting in Coach McDonald's ear and saying, "Hey, how about the kid from USC? let's go grab him. Let's go grab him." But in general, there are traits that he possesses that you could translate to being a 3-down back, maybe like 2 or 3 years from now, because he has them all. There's just things that he needs to get a little bit better at. But namely, one of those would probably be his vision. But again, we're talking running back by committee style here. I feel like he's got all the intangibles in terms of change of pace, different style running back. He dominates in the gap systems to run through. You mix that together with Gus Edwards and Isaiah Spiller, I think you got something if you had a 3-headed monster, if you add Marshawn Lloyd to this group.
Jake, Marshawn Lloyd, I think, is, of all the running backs, take away best fit, I think he's my favorite running back in terms of just like the boom, the play style, explosiveness, the violence he has in his feet as a runner, like the hunter of the big play. Like, he just has the look of the running back that I want on my team. Now, is he the best fit? I have him as my 4. You have him as your 5, correct?
Correct.
So this is working out well. Love Marshawn Lloyd. I've said this before. He reminds me a little bit of how Reggie Bush used to run while at USC, where he used like every inch of grass. He kind of cut against the grain, shifting all over the place. He's just kind of like a flashy play machine. And what I do think is really intriguing with him is he's a raw player. He only had 115 rush attempts this past year, but had a 7.1 yards per attempt. 4th among all running backs with 100 plus attempts. 7.1 yards per carry. Imagine that on the Chargers. Now, you're not going to get 7.1, obviously, but the guy is efficient. And talk about like boom waiting to happen. Like, he's just a breakaway guy. 4.46. You see the 40 time jump off the page in real life scenarios on the field. Great out of the backfield, elusive as any running back in this class. 47 missed tackles forced on only 115 attempts. That's better than Tyron Tracy, which we talked about was elite. 0.41 missed tackles forced per rush attempt. Like, elite. Now, negative. Not the greatest in pass protection, which I think would probably be a bit of a red flag for this coaching staff, would probably be a big reason why he's not higher on my list. But he's so shifty. His first step is so good. Change of direction is good. He has the highest elusive grade of all running backs according to PFF with 100 plus snaps. Explodes through line of scrimmage with ease. Wastes 0 time. He does have some issues with drops out of the backfield. That's another red flag. So pass protection and drops. But again, he's like a raw athletic talent that you just bring in, and he makes your running back committee faster, more explosive, and more able to hit home runs. And how often have we talked about this Chargers team Doesn't matter the running back. They can't finish. And they can't get explosiveness. And so he would be such a good running back by committee, to your point, alongside Gus Edwards, alongside Isaiah Spiller. Change of pace, I think he'd be epic. I think he's my favorite running back. Just all things being equal, I think he's my favorite. Okay, Jake. Number 4 on your list belongs to who?
That would be Trey Benson, Florida State.
Oh, here
now,
we go.
I'm ready to hear all of these things, considering where you had him on your list, Dan. Again, a lot like Marshawn Lloyd. I think that he's got the traits of a running back that could eventually turn into an RB1. Big, physical, downfield runner, great athletic ability, was one of the tougher running backs to bring down. Now, injury history has slowed his development as he barely played through 2021, which in some type of circumstances in which way you want to look at it, it means he's got less mileage on the wheels. So that could be looked at as a positive for NFL coaches, given that he only has 350 career touches. Now, yes, he needs to develop more as a pass protector. And also, let's not forget, Dan, Florida State had one of the more beat up offensive line in 2023.
You're being kind.
And yet with that, Benson still put up over 1,100 all-purpose yards. So I really like what I see. I understand people's criticism on it. This is another one where the grades on Trey Benson can literally be all over the place. Some people believe he's the top running back in this class. And I would understand.
They're all over the place on this show.
They're definitely all over the place in this show. And they've been all over the place as it relates to his grades nationally. But I look at him and I still like what I see. Again, if we're talking about installing Trey Benson today in a running back by committee in a Chargers backfield, I like it. I like it a lot. Do I think that he would come in today to be anybody's RB1? No, I think he would struggle at that. And I think he needs a little bit more time to develop his full cachet of tools. But Trey Benson in this running back by committee with this type of style, I like it. Now, Dan, please, for the love of God, tell me why you were so low on Trey Benson.
Oh boy, here we go. Okay, so again, they're on the top 10. I would be happy with any of these guys on the Chargers, and I like them. Like, none of the guys I'm talking about, I dislike. And again, a lot of these are kind of like pick your flavor. And there are lots of reasons why I like Trey Benson, but then there are reasons why I like other guys more. And so, again, I have Trey Benson at number 9. I'm sorry for people who are Trey Benson stans, but let's start with the good. Okay. Super athletic. Just looks the part of an athletic freak. You want that explosiveness on your offense, right? 4.39 40 time. The size is ideal. 6'2", 16. Really good in gap rushing schemes. Like, all this stuff is great. I think he's effective, elusive out of the backfield, and he kind of just glides away from people. And I love that about him because his team needs speed. I just got done talking about the team needing speed, and that's why I like Marshawn Lloyd as well. But it seems to me, and this is where I got hung up on, and I was trying to figure out how to double click on it. I think I found it. He wins with speed and suddenness. Like, that's his thing, right? But he doesn't win with elusiveness. Like, he only runs away or around people. He doesn't shift away. He's not lateral. And given the measurables, given how athletic he is, he lacks shiftiness like quite a bit. And I went to PFF to try to like figure out how I can explain this. But if you look at like elusiveness grades, for a guy who has 4.39 40 with those measurables, you see him break away, you see him burst through the holes with speed, all that kind of stuff. Among running backs with 100 or more attempts, his elusiveness grade, Jake, 42nd. Like, it boggles my mind how somebody that is that fast and that, in theory, agile and athletic is that low on that ranking. And you look at kind of the way he's he doesn't really have much suddenness with his like start, stop, kind of adjusting, like you look at your, Game Boy or your Xbox controller is going from like up to right to left. He doesn't really have that. Like he doesn't have the start, stop. He doesn't have like the lateral stuff. And so while the speed would be awesome and like the urgency and the suddenness, like I love all of that. But I just don't think he has some of the other traits that some of the other guys who also have speed and straight line quickness can bring. And so I have him at 9. I like him. Like he's good in pass protection too, which I know is something this coaching staff's probably going to like. A lot of the characteristics I really like in terms of what he brings, but I just think I kind of look at it and you watch him play and it's a lot of the same thing over and over and over again. And I just don't think there's that many tools in his bag. Is that crazy?
Look, it's not crazy. I mean, he's not. I think if you're talking about like the difference of saying like, oh, if someone is going to come in to make a case today to say that Trey Benson is RB1 in this class, I would have some questions. And much in the line with what Dan is saying, just in terms of the overall package, to say the athletic tools and the athletic abilities of him are there. There's no denying that, what it is. But in terms of what you're taking with you to the next level, you can't just rely on one or two tools that you have in the bag in order to thrive as a RB1 in the league. Now, again, this is why I had him higher, because we're talking about potential fits for the Chargers. There are still things that Trey Benson needs to develop when he gets to the next level. But
like I don't see patience behind his blockers. I don't see him reading the line of scrimmage. I don't see him bouncing from one lane to the next.
Relies sometimes too much on his athleticism. I get it. But if you're to tell me with those athletic traits that you couldn't put him in an RB by committee group, that's why I have him where I have him.
Yep.
I think that athleticism, you can fine tool the rest and you can get to work. It's still going to take some time for him to develop, obviously, but that's why I have him as high as I do.
Yeah, and I think we're getting to the part of the good stuff where we're getting to the running backs who, and correct me if I'm wrong, but at least for me, we're getting to the running backs that, and for me anyways, because remember, I have him at 9. I'm talking about now running backs that I can trust. I'm talking about running backs that I know what they do it well, and they have many things under their tool belt, and they take in coaching. They have kind of the cerebral approach. They understand how to run in a running game and can be flexible with how they win. And some of the guys we've had on this list, maybe one or two trick ponies. We're getting to the cream of the crop here, at least for this class, that I'm really excited to kind of get into. Okay, Jake, we're on the top 3. And this might be a little loose with how we say where we're using the term top 3.
Mm-hmm.
But for the Chargers, Jake, number 3 goes to who?
Again, we're talking best fits for the Chargers, not talking about overall running back rankings. Otherwise, this would be a much different list. Number 3, I actually have Bucky Irving. Dan.
Oh, goodness gracious. Okay. Let's go.
All right. Look, great burst in agility when he gets the ball. All right. That's what I see. Terrific footwork when moving through traffic or having to put his foot in the ground and cut outside. Has that kind of versatility, again, that you want in a running back. Finished with 1,192 yards, 11 touchdowns, ran for 6.4 yards per attempt. Great production in the passing game, Dan. This is the second time that I've had to bring that up in terms of finding guys with a versatile skill set that I think that you have to change a little bit of the dynamic for what you currently have in your running back stable.
Fair.
So Irving had 85 catches over the past 2 seasons for just under 700 yards. Again, another running back that doesn't have the home run speed. Totally understand that. but he's going to receive interest from a number of different teams from his value, both in the run and the pass. And again, that production in the pass game is something that I see as just, and it's another change of pace aspect as it relates to what this running back stable currently has. And yeah, people might be torching me right now for considering that it is the number 3. But in terms of best fits for the Chargers, I mean, hell, what were we just talking about with Trey Benson? Okay. There's plenty of reasons why every single one of these guys could fit in the Chargers running back room right now. In reality, the best part about this is honestly, that the Chargers aren't looking for an RB1, which opens up the doors for so many of these different players in this class, which is advantageous for the Chargers. We just don't know when they're going to choose to go after one of them. So honestly, I don't disagree with any players that Dan has brought up. I might disagree with where he ranked them, but I don't disagree with one single player that Dan has brought up. I think that any of these guys would honestly be a good fit.
Okay. Wow. All right. So I have, again, so Bucky Irving is not in my top 10. He is just outside, honorable mention, number 11. I like Bucky Irving. And with the Chargers no longer having Austin Eckler, like he'd be a great
there it is.
Out with Austin Eckler, in with the Bucky Irving. Wipe your hands, you're good to go, and you're off. And there's a lot to like, right? Like he's super quick. His lateral agility is incredible. Like epitome of elusiveness. 6.4 yards per attempt, which is awesome. Almost 1,600 yards rushing and receiving combined. You talked about out of the backfield. Awesome. 69 missed tackles forced on 186 attempts. It's pretty good. Not great in pass blocking. One of the things that he and Austin Eckler differ in is I would not trust him in pass pro. But you talked about it. Great out of the backfield. Only 3 drops on 61 targets, which is crazy. And on his 486 rushing attempts in his career, 1 fumble. Just 1. Love that. The problem I have is when you're that size and he plays smaller than I think the metrics show, in my opinion. When you're that size, like, in my opinion, that running back has to be blazing. And he has to have like elite traits to kind of make up for the lack of size, especially at the running back position. And like, I don't think he's a pound for pound guy at all, like Austin Eckler. And so I think he can kind of get bullied and out physical by most defenders. And I don't know if that's what this Chargers team is really looking for, considering they just told Austin Eckler, according to reports, like that's essentially not what they're looking for. And in the running back by committee style that I'm thinking of, like, I think it's time this Chargers game includes rushers who can excel at rushing in the NFL. And I just don't know if he can. And I love him as a college player, but I just don't know. He's one of the players that has like a really low floor to me, where it could go real bad to her and you might not be able to stay on the field. Honorable mention, I like him, but I don't think he's not in my top 10 of guys I like the most for this team. Now we're getting to the fun ones. And these are all probably guys, in my opinion, that, for me anyways, and I probably would go up. Let me just look at my top guys real fast. Yes, Marshawn Lloyd was number 4. I think he could be an RB1 in time. Braelon Allen, I think he could be an RB1. He was my 5. Tyron Tracy, I think he could be an RB1. We're getting to the guys who I think, in my opinion, can be standouts of their group, of their committee, if they were to, or stand on their own above the rest as RB1s. My number 3, Jake, is Jaylen Wright. And I think people might be upset that he's not higher. And there's a couple names you haven't heard of.
You're looking at one of them.
There's a couple names we haven't heard yet from me anyways that we'll get to. And let's just get into it for a second, Jake. I'll give people a chance to kind of simmer on this and fester. My number 2 is Jonathan Brooks, which you could probably figure out who my number 1 is. But number 3, Jaylen Wright. He is, so like we talk about speed, right? Like he is the guy where if I had somebody with speed on my team, comparing him to, in my opinion, is the best fit for this Chargers team. He's someone that you're banking on the traits. You're banking on the raw abilities, the untapped potential. You're banking on somebody who can have the best football ahead of him, which is great. Like you're banking on the measurables, right? 5'11", 210, right? Ideal. You're banking on the fact that he had a 7.4 yards per attempt on the ground. He had over 1,000 yards production on just 136 carries. The kid's probably one of the most elusive in this entire draft class. You saw him light up the combine, 4.38 40, 38-inch vertical, 11.2 broad. Like athleticism just screams off the charts. Lance Zierlein comped him to probably what is a familiar name to many Chargers fans. While I think he is more explosive and faster than the person he comped him to Melvin Gordon. And running style, I think he is like Melvin Gordon. But I think there is a little bit more nuance. And I think that Jaylen Wright is more explosive, in my opinion, than Melvin Gordon. But not the shiftiest, right? But he's just so smooth. He's so sudden. He posted an explosive run, which is 10 yards or more, on 25% of his carries. 1 out of 4 of his carries went for 10 or more yards. Great in pass protection. 5th best yards after contact per attempt in college. 5th best. With him, you're buying on potential, no questions asked. The one red flag, there's a couple, I should say. One red flag is the fumbles. You've seen the 4 fumbles. Like that could be something people might be worried about. You wonder how lateral he can be. But there's so much to like and so much untapped potential. You get him with the coaching staff and with an offensive line and with a quarterback that can kind of help exploit defenses. He's in my top 3. I like Jaylen Wright a lot.
Everything that you were saying in terms of what he does well. But I go back to how you opened this conversation with Jaylen Wright. Everybody's banking on the potential. Everybody's banking on hoping that he's going to turn it. Okay, look. If the Chargers didn't have Gus Edwards and there was a gaping hole at RB1 and you were looking for your next potential starter that's going to carry you for the next 4 to 5 years, you might have a legitimate argument for that. But do you mean to tell me that all those traits are not worth taking a shot on for RB2 as part of a committee? Just a thought. Just a thought, Dan. I get everything you're saying, but you took a lot of, obviously, and explained it very well just in terms of what he brings to the table. Yes, there's potential that you're banking on to hope that he develops more and more, but again, you're not asking him to do it as RB1. You're asking him to do it in a committee system, which I think he's going to have plenty of opportunities to do. Explosive, elusive, plus production in both zone and gap schemes. Great footwork. Can outrun defenders once he gets into the next level. Can be a home run hitter anytime that he touches the ball. That was apparent with his 4.38 time at the combine. He's actually not bad in pass protection either. If you were to tell me that the Chargers would somehow end up out of this draft, I doubt it, just considering where they're going to prioritize taking a running back now. But Jaylen Wright, as a part of this group with Gus Edwards and whatever it is that you may find with Isaiah Spiller, yeah.
And
sure.
And you bring up a really good point. And this is, I think, the part of the episode that I think we have to remember, like, this Chargers team has a lot of holes to fill. And again, we're talking about best fits in isolation, right? We're talking about best fits for this team as running back. But if you like expand upon that, and when these players may or may not get drafted, when they would need to get drafted in order to be on their squad, it kind of complicates things. And that's one of the things that's tough about this running back class is you have no idea. Not only where their projections are, but where they rank among the other NFL teams. Because it's probably all over the place.
Right.
Okay, so we're at our top twos for each of our top two. And this is kind of surprising how I ended up where I did. And I'm going through, and we'll get to it. We'll get to your number two here. But I don't know if you felt the same way, but I went into it kind of expecting one ranking, and I came out of it differently. It's kind of refreshing. And so when that kind of stuff happens to me, I always get kind of excited. I'm always like, yeah, man, like this is why I love doing this stuff. Jake, your number two.
My number two, Dan. It's Blake Corum. It's Blake Corum. And again, we're talking fits for the Chargers. If we're talking overall running back, and you kind of mentioned it, Dan. Seeing it like that really screwed with me because I had to keep putting the hat on to say, like, look, this is how and why it makes sense for X player that's going to be a good fit in this system. And with Blake Corum, obviously, the Michigan ties just make it evident. I think if you were to say Blake Corum is probably in the top 3 of the possibilities of players that could end up on the Chargers come next month. But in general, age, mileage, size concerns, those are some of the biggest criticisms that come up when people talk about Blake Corum, which is understandable. I get it. And it would be interesting to know what type of different universe we would have been living in had Blake Corum not torn his meniscus last season. Because if he didn't, he may have left for the NFL then, and he ended up deciding to make a return to Michigan. And not only did he return, he came back with a vengeance. With a vengeance. So, in some stats, aside from touchdowns, he was actually more productive in 2022 than he was in 23. But in terms of touchdown goes, he basically doubled, not doubled, but added another 10 than what he had in 2022. Again, short, compact frame, can get low, can get leverage on defenders, one cut ability, has burst, change of direction. Not the best when it comes to pass protection due to his frame, and he doesn't have the home run speed for that either as it relates to other running backs in this class goes. But just the intangibles that he brings to the table, played at a pro-ready offense, he already is going to be so familiar with Jim Harbaugh. If this ends up coming to fruition and the Chargers end up getting Blake Corum, criticisms about him being older and carrying the load as an RB1, you can have those criticisms. That's totally fine. But if we're talking about Blake Corum as part of a group of running backs, Blake Corum brings a lot of stuff that gets you excited in terms of what you already have at the table right now and what he could bring to it. Plenty of reason to get excited for the possibility of Blake Corum.
Now, I have Blake Corum as RB1 for the Chargers. And there's a lot of reason for that. Before I get to Blake Corum, who do you have as your RB1 then?
So again, if we're talking overall running back one in this class, if we weren't talking about best fits for the Chargers, for me, it would be Jonathan Brooks. It would be Jonathan Brooks. I think, unfortunately, due to his injury, I'd be interested to know where he's going to go ultimately. I don't think that that's going to be something that the Chargers are going to end up taking a risk on. I know that they said that everything looks good for him right now, that he'll be ready for training camp. And honest to God, if he was healthy, this could be a much different conversation because his skill set is ideal for what you would want in this Chargers running back unit. Like if we were talking about anyone, because we've talked about in previous episodes, Dan, that there was no Bijan in this class, there was no Gibbs in this class. Brooks, to me, honestly, would probably be the top one that you could say in terms of that universe. The closest thing to it may be Jonathan Brooks. But ultimately, as it relates to this list and best fits for the Chargers, my number one was Jaylen Wright.
I love the way that you snuck in an extra guy there with a little asterisk. That was brilliant. Brilliant on your part. I bow to you, sir.
I mean, look, that's what I was also telling you of how this ranking was screwing with me.
Yeah.
We're talking about best fits for the Chargers. We're not talking about the overall running back ranks, because if we did, this would be a much different list. Because certain things, as it relates to connections to Michigan with Blake Corum, obviously that's going to elevate him. Marshawn Lloyd's running backs coach from USC, that's going to, there's intangibles here that are helping elevate some of these guys. But Dan, go ahead. Enlighten us about Mr. Jonathan Brooks.
So Jonathan Brooks, crazy as this sounds, I have him as RB2 for the Chargers. And I think that's even if he's healthy, which is crazy. I know. Let me explain. I think if we're talking, I think when I get down to this, and this is where it's like polar opposite between him and Blake Corum. I think for Jonathan Brooks, I think his ceiling is much higher than most running backs in this class. Probably all of them in this class, aside from maybe... No, it probably is the highest ceiling. But what I keep going back to, and I kind of teased it there a little bit ago, the Chargers have been so desperate and have been so lacking any sort of efficient, trustworthy, consistent, efficient, reliable, punishing, you name it. Add the superlative. They've lacked it in the running game. And so when I'm going down creating my list, like I'm going for, like, in my opinion, what is the most sure thing that this Chargers team can do? And Jonathan Brooks has so many accolades to love, and that's why he's number 2 on my list. And I struggle with, same with you, where to put him on my list. Like, he's got the production when healthy. He's got the athleticism. He's got the speed. He's got the potential. But that ACL thing's real. No idea where he ends up going in this draft. Like, I think if we're talking just on talent, Jake, he's probably what? Like a top 30, 40 player?
I would say
maybe even higher than that. Even higher than that. But because
I would say top 40. I would say top 40.
But because of the position, because of the injury history, it's probably going to put him down. But maybe not. Maybe
Who
not.
knows? We've seen Stranger Things.
All 3 seasons.
Yes, all 4 seasons. Five's on the way.
He's going to be a good NFL running back, and I'd love to see the Chargers get him. I think that'd be awesome. He's more proven than Jaylen Wright, and he has all that NFL teams would want and covet in a running back as a bell cow. Like, he's probably RB1 unanimously across the NFL scouting circles, if I had to guess. But he's RB2 for the reason that I said before. The Chargers need as close to a guarantee and the highest floor they could possibly get if they're going to draft a running back high. And that's not Jonathan Brooks. It's just not. And this is where I get to what shocked me the most. I was not expecting Blake Corum to be my RB1 for the Chargers. I wasn't expecting it at all. And as I was going through watching all of these players, when I finally got to Blake Corum, I was like, I kept trying to find who he's worse than and who I would rather entrust this running back room to. And I just couldn't find it. And you talk about the production, right? 56 touchdowns and almost 3,700 yards in 3 seasons. 27 touchdowns and almost 1,300 yards this year alone. In my opinion, Jake, I think he is the most NFL-ready running back in this entire draft class. And again, that's not to say that he has the highest floor, or excuse me, highest ceiling, but it is to say that I trust him more than any other running back to do his job and do it better and do it the way that the coaching staff wants him to. And when you watch what he did in Michigan, like, let's take a step back for a second. Like, Michigan is a NFL-style offense. They relied on the running game. That's why J.J. McCarthy hadn't had the stats that everybody thought, is because of guys like Blake Corum, of the philosophy that they ran. There's so many things that I just kept liking more and more and more and more. He's always under control. He seems like he's always doing the right thing. Was one of the biggest reasons why the team won. Again, 27 touchdowns. Some of that would be kind of a touchdown merchant. Most of them were like within the 5. But I don't care. Like, he did his job. Side steps, jump cuts, start, stop, setting up defenders with purpose, crazy patience, following his blockers. All of that, he's there. He's going to the right hole, going to the right spot, reading things correctly. If it's 3, 4, 5, 10 yards, cool. He's not going for the game-breaking stuff. And that's the part that was weird to me. Like, you look at some of the metrics other than volume, right? Because he had so many attempts. That's why he had so much yardage and production. He didn't have like a great yards per attempt. He didn't have the breakaway stuff. Didn't have the missed tackles force or the yards after contact or elucidating. That stuff wasn't necessarily him. Those were all honestly kind of relatively low. But I trust my eyes with this guy. I trust the tape. I trust the coaching. And I trust the character, man. Like, the kid, you've heard everyone from Michigan rave about this guy. He is such a good guy on and off the field. I think his vision, I think he's cerebral. I think he has maxed out his potential. And he's a player, Jake, that I see as what you see in college is what you'll get in the NFL. And I equate those production, the stats, the vision, the style, the archetype. I have no risk, no aversion, no hesitancy to have him be RB1 or RB by committee in this room. And I can almost guarantee you, I would sleep well at night with him as running back. And again, I'm not saying he's the most explosive, but he's what this team freaking needs, dude. Give me someone who could average 4.5 yards and get first downs and touchdowns. Gold. I got more to say about Blake Corum. I want to take a breath because I'm getting a little flustered here of how excited I am. I was surprised to have him that high. Did you think you were going to have Blake Corum at 2 when you went into this?
It hovered at like the 2 to 3 range. It did for me. And again, just from the standpoint of what he's done, you have coach familiarity there. In terms of aspects, if we wanted to just call it like, you know, the what's that old saying? Jack of all trades, master of none. There's a lot of running backs that are like that in this class. Blake's up there where it's pretty damn close in terms of what he gives you. You know, yes, as Dan mentioned, the speed, downfield speed is not there compared to some other guys that were lower on this list. But in terms of what it is that you're trying to build with a running back that can bring a different facet to this particular unit, if the running game is as important as we've heard Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman, and everybody else talk about, and you install Blake Corum in a running back by committee. Now, see, I'm of the belief that if we were talking about the Chargers having no running backs in this stable, probably wouldn't have them that high. Probably have them a little bit lower, because then to me, the age factor does shine a little bit brighter.
The tread, for sure.
The tread does. But now you put him in an running back by committee, that light diminishes to me. And in the best possible way, because now you can give him more frequent breaks. He doesn't have to worry about toting the rock every single down. And how are you can utilize him in a multitude of different ways in an offense. So when it came down to the best fits for the Chargers, like, yeah, I knew he was going to be up there, and it was probably going to hover around 2 or 3 for me. But I mean, when you look at what it is that the Chargers have, what they want to do, Corum does fit the mold for that. He does.
I was surprised. I was thinking he'd be like 4 or 5 for me because like, I think
definitely didn't think you were going to have number 1.
Yeah, I think you oftentimes think about like you want that, you know, the bell cow, the guy like the Marshawn Lloyd type, the Jaylen Wright maybe, or if you want to get like the crazy physical, you go the Braelon Allen way where they could just like carry the rock 20, 35 times a game, be good to go. I'll kind of end it with this, like all the measurables, all the numbers you saw at the combine, all that kind of stuff. Like you saw him trail a bit from like the top dogs in terms of like the 40 times or like the explosiveness, right? But then I don't know if you guys remember, but when they got to the drills, and I distinctly remember the simulcast stuff that they were doing, where they showed him, and I forget whether running back it was, but it was someone who was definitely faster than him in the drills or in the measurables, in the 40 and all that kind of stuff. And you get to the drills, and he's yards ahead of them in applied speed, applied quickness. And that translates. Like 40 times translate in an open field, sure. But how fast are you in the middle of it? And I think that's where Blake Corum shines. And he just does things faster. His internal clock is faster. And he processes things faster. And it was just interesting to see him dust folks who are physically more gifted than him because of how refined he is as a runner. Now, clearly, you mentioned it, like great fit for the Chargers because of Jim Harbaugh and because of the Michigan style and the scheme connection. You know, he runs like the 4th most gap attempts in the entire league last year. In my opinion, he's as close to a sure bet as you can get in terms of like the transition from college to the NFL. I think he's arguably the highest floor, the least risk of any of them here, the most trustworthy running back in this class, in my opinion. And like I said at the top, that's what this team needs more than anything else. They need a runner who can do his job better, like who can listen to coaching better, who fits the scheme better, trust the teammates better, trust the line, lead the team better. Of all the Michigan guys coming out this year, and it's close between him and Mike Sanderstill, I think he's the most Jim Harbaugh type guy of any player in this draft. And you've heard so much about him in the leadership qualities off the field and on the field. That's why I have him as RB1 for the Chargers. Like this Chargers team needs this fixed. How many years have we gone through this, Jake, where we're wondering like, okay, this is the year. You know, they went and got coaching staff, running backs, drafted guys. Look at how many third round running backs we've brought in, coaching staffs that we've gone through. And it just hasn't worked. This is the one I know if Blake Corum was drafted by the Chargers, combined with Gus Edwards, combined with the free agency that they brought in, the coaching staff from offensive coordinator to the head coach, like Greg Roman, sure bet, easy money.
We should have opened the episode with this, Dan, but remember the last time that we were talking about running backs, Gus Edwards was not a part of this team yet. I think that was just prior to free agency. That's when we had Jordan Reed on the show, and he was telling us how much he thought it was just the perfect fit for the Chargers to go out and get a Braelon Allen. Mm-hmm. But now, post-free agency, you know, we probably had predicted previously that the Chargers could start anywhere early, with their 3rd round pick, maybe considering
probably
running backs?
At the earliest, probably.
Where do you feel that conversation now is realistically after you have brought Gus Edwards to this team?
I'm going to answer that with it depends. And It's an easy cop out. But if they do not trade back and only have one pick in round 1, 2, 3, 4, it's probably round 4 at the earliest. Not because some guys aren't worth it, but because, like, who's their outside corner right now? Who's their wide receiver 1 right now? Like, there's a lot of positions that this team, I think, needs to put more assets into earlier. But this is kind of like the wild card, where if they gained an extra pick, this would be the position that I think this staff and front office would go towards. Like, it makes sense why they would want to get an extra pick so they can do this. Because we've heard how important the running game is. But we also know how much is kind of the roles diminished in the NFL. And so if they don't trade back, it's going to be tough. In my opinion, it might be a little harsh to imagine a running back going in your first 3 picks. Like, that's going to be tough when you're seeing some of those other skill positions go off the board, man. But if you're getting it for free, how about this, Sig? If you're getting it for free, let's say you get an extra pick.
Okay.
Which running back are you picking? And we're taking into account like when you're taking them.
Okay. I was going to say, if you're giving me the full gamut, this would make it easy. But
like for example, would you rather have Blake Corum in? See, this is tough. I don't know if he's like a late. He's probably round 3 is my guess. Maybe round 4, but I doubt it. Like, would you rather go Blake Corum 3-4 or like Braelon Allen, Audric Estime in rounds 5? Probably 5. Maybe you want to get Braelon Allen at 6, but let's say 5.
2 things: A, Gus Edwards is on the team. B, the Chargers have bigger priorities to fill in those first 3 rounds. So to me, I would say it doesn't start until round 4, and I would be okay if Braelon Allen somehow went to 4. It's possible, not likely, but possible, because I think there is going to be a run on running backs really ramping up in the 3rd round, honestly. But if he's there,
in the
Marshawn,
4th?
Yeah, if he's there, sure. That's the route that I would go. And again, it doesn't even have to necessarily be Braelon Allen. There's a plethora of guys that you can go with. But I think you're back in that day 3 discussion for when you're going to prioritize running backs. Now, don't fret, because Tom Telesco is not the one making the selection this time. So hopefully, it should end up working out a little bit better.
Well, this went far longer than I thought this is going to go, but I think it's because I think we got into it and realized like there's a lot more on the bone here than I think people are giving credit. And because of what position the Chargers have put themselves in, we don't need like a bona fide RB1. That's kind of what opened the floodgates to like, oh, well, there's a lot of good fits here.
It's the beauty of free agency, isn't it?
Yes. In the comments, if you've made it this far, first off, shout out to you.
Yeah, thank you. Dear God.
I hope your workout was great or your long drive was good. Or
through all that.
Let us know in the comments what you think. Why are we wrong? Why are we right? Where would you rank some of these guys?
Mainly why we were wrong.
Yeah. Anything else, Jake? We've basically talked about anything I could think of about these guys. Anything else we want to talk about before we get out of here?
I was trying to think about it, honestly. There's probably a whole nother episode that we could do on honorable mentions alone as it relates to this class. Again, now since we're talking about somebody coming in that is not going to be an RB1 and just part of a committee, it really is now changed the entirety of the perspective as how you look at this draft and specifically to this running back position. Again, not a strong position at all. We know this. This is no secret in terms of if you're looking for your 3-down running back. But in terms of guys that you could add to a mix, there's a plenty. And that's what made this conversation harder for me than what I thought it was going to be when we were talking about these rankings. And honestly, I woke up this morning saying, shit. Do I need to go back? Do I need to re-rank them? Do I need to adjust some certain stuff? And I said, you know what, just screw it, run with it, because I don't have anything bad to say about any of the guys that we talked about. And honestly, I feel like any one of them would add a different element of juice to this running back room.
Amen. Yeah, let us know in the comments what you guys think. We'll be doing more of these. We already did linebackers. We just did running backs. I'll look for more of these as we get to NFL draft. What, 30 days? 30 days until the NFL draft. Until next time, you can see Jake Hefner and his beautiful face at Jake G. Hefner on X, myself at Dan W Sports. Guys, gals, children of all ages, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time on Chargers Unleashed.